to America Uncanceled. Schlapp, I think it's like day 2 that we've actually get to hang out together again, which has been so lovely.
It's a little clunky, I'll just say.
It's a little clunky.
We're trying to figure this out.
We're trying to get back into a rhythm, but thank God our next guest will help us get there, I think, right?
Yeah, so it's a great friend of CPAC, Senator Mike Lee from the state of Utah, with a 99% lifetime ACU rating.
Wow.
I don't know what he ever got wrong, so that can't be right. But anyway, 99%. The ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, a leading legal mind, and is coming out with a brand new book.
Yeah.
Have you read it yet?
Not yet, because it's coming out June 7th, but we'll make sure to pre-order it because I'm really excited about reading this book. It's called Saving 9. It deals with the Supreme Court and why it's so important to preserve the Supreme Court with 9 justices. As you know, as we all know, the Democrats' attempt has been to expand the court. Senator Mike Lee, let's, first of all, thanks for joining us, and let's talk about this book that's coming out.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited about it. Look, I started writing Saving 9 a little over a year ago because I started thinking about it, and I realized, hey, the Supreme Court's almost certainly going to take up an abortion case in the next term. It did. The Supreme Court, if it does take up that case, which it did, is likely going to overturn Roe versus Wade. And if it does, there are going to be renewed calls to pack the court, something we haven't seen since 1937. That's why I wrote Saving 9, because this would be destructive, not just of the independence of the judiciary, but of the whole constitutional framework. This book explains why, and it explains what all Americans can do if they want to stop it.
Mike Lee, it's like the lowest common denominator. It seems like whenever we get into this battle of how many votes it should take in the Senate to overcome a filibuster, when a filibuster can be used, it's always the Democrats that end up doing the thing that breaks the institution, and then the Republicans are faced with the challenge of going back to the old order, which was better, or just kind of doubling down and beating them at their own game. If they were to pack the court, is this just going to break that whole idea, this kind of idea that there's 9 justices and then we're going to have to beat them at their own game?
Yes. In fact, that's a consistent theme in Saving 9. In fact, in chapters 8 and 9 of Saving 9, I explore that very issue. And what I point out is that Republicans have, at least for the last 152, 153 years, since we've set the level at 9, we've been content with leaving it at 9. We haven't, during that time period, tried to pack the court. But if the Democrats were to do this, it would be a one-way ratchet. Because of the way the Supreme Court is set up, you know, they have lifetime tenure. They serve for the rest of their lives, or unless they're either impeached and removed, or they, resign or something. And so you can't just remove the position because people are still in there. And as a result of that, Republicans would end up responding tit for tat. So if the Democrats add 4 this time, Republicans would add 4 next time. It'd go back and forth. Different parties gain control of the House, Senate, and White House. It'd start to look like the intergalactic Senate in the Star Wars movies before long, and it wouldn't be a judicial body, but a political one.
Well, I'm sure when you were writing this book, just digging into the history of the Supreme Court, why did they go with 9 justices in the first place? Number one. Number two, what is the big argument that you're making here as to why we have to keep it to 9 justices?
Yeah, so in chapters 2 and 3 of Saving 9, I explain how we got there. It really was more art than science, sort of art mixed with happenstance. The Supreme Court has been 6. It's had 6 justices. It's had 5. It's had 7. It's gotten up as high as 10. But we ultimately settled on 9 just because that's the way it worked out 153 years ago. And having reached that point, we decided it would be a bad idea to politicize it, which would happen if we were to change the number now. The only way that one could plausibly come up with a legitimate means of doing it is if they concluded that the court simply wasn't big enough from a human resources standpoint, if they were understaffed with only 9 justices. That's not the case. That's not nearly the case today. And so the only other reason why you'd want to change it would be to secure a partisan political advantage by using the courts for things the courts aren't well equipped to handle. So that's why we have to stop it, because there's no way, once you start changing it now, no way to stop that from turning the Supreme Court into a political institution.
Now, Mike Lee, I'm going to probably make you uncomfortable, but there are two ideas there.
I can stop him. I'll stop him right now.
Saving 9. That first word is awfully important. Saving. To me, there's like a double entendre there. How do we save the respectful history of the Supreme Court when it's becoming so politicized? And this leak that recently happened is an example of what must be a increasingly rancorous and political kind of environment, even at the Supreme Court. How can we save an independent judiciary if they become this political?
Yeah, great question, Matt. And first of all, I love the interplay there between husband and wife, Matt and Mercy. We could call it mercy and justice. He wants to go in for the kill. She's offering to provide mercy. But yeah,
I'm like, don't harm my favorite senator. That would be horrible.
Oh, that's kind of you, Mercedes. I appreciate that. All right, so look, warts and all, despite its flaws, and the Supreme Court has them because it's run by mortals, the Supreme Court is still the finest institution of its kind anywhere in the world. I'd stack it up against any other and it would outperform all of them. And so this is something that, despite the fact that it, in some instances, in some areas, it has become politicized, it is still mostly a good court. And so that's why we need to save it, because when it's not making law, and by the way, that's what it's doing in overturning Roe versus Wade, in Justice Alito's masterful draft majority opinion, it's incredibly well written, trying to get the courts out of the political debate, is trying to say, look, abortion, not made federal by the Constitution, not taken off the plate for the people's elected lawmakers by the Constitution. Therefore, it remains with the people, where typically that's going to be regulated at the state level, not the federal one.
Yeah, the one other quick question on that. I guess the part that I thought would make you uncomfortable, but to me, the idea that a lower level staffer made this leak of this draft opinion, I don't know. I find it a little bit implausible. I know they're finishing up or pursuing an investigation as to what happened there, but is it plausible that a justice kind of with a wink and a nod had someone, a clerk or a staffer, leak this document?
Plausible and possible, yes. Likely, no. I personally ascribe to the law clerk theory. I think this was likely a law clerk. I think it's going to be relatively easy to figure out who it was. I see now that they're requesting phone records and requiring the signing of affidavits by law clerks. I think they're going to figure this out. But yeah, the reason I think it's more likely a law clerk than the justice, look, these people, once they're confirmed, they're on there for life. And so they've got to work with each other. The downside to them of playing any part in having it leaked is too high. It's also high for the law clerk, because I think that the law clerk probably will be and probably should be disbarred and never be allowed to practice law again. But a law clerk isn't stuck there for the rest of his or her life and can pursue other interests. The justices are there for good.
Can I ask, Mike, a quick question on that?
Sure.
Could a president pardon this law clerk, and would that allow them to practice law again?
Interesting. Presidential pardons extend to federal crimes, and the decision made by a bar association to disbar someone would be a professional body operating within a state law framework and not within a criminal law context. So, yeah, president, if there were a federal crime committed, president could pardon that, but a president can't undo a disciplinary action by a bar association.
Can I ask a question now?
No, I'm going to keep going.
Okay, no, I know this is like one of your favorite topics. So, but let me ask you, Senator, so the leak occurred. We've seen these protests happening outside the conservative justices' homes. It really is about mounting this pressure on these justices to break on this issue. What do you believe will be the consequences if and when Roe v. Wade is overturned?
Yeah, I think we're likely to see more protesting and that sort of thing. It's unfortunate that people have chosen to protest, and number one, as if this were a political matter before a political body, when it's neither. I think it's most unfortunate that they've chosen to do so at the justices' homes. Now, long before the leak occurred, long before I knew that was going to happen, I pointed out in the book, I think it's in either chapter 1 or chapter 2, I told the story of when I was 11 years old and protesters showed up to my home. I was home alone at the time. Actually, my older sister Wendy was a teenager, slept through the whole thing, but I was effectively at home alone. And a large commercial-sized bus full of abortion rights protesters showed up at my parents' home and protested. And I explained that I went out and talked to the person who appeared to be in charge. We'll call her Karen. I asked, why are you protesting in front of my home? And she very creepily said, "Oh, hello, little boy. We're not here to hurt you." Don't ever say that to a kid.
Yeah.
But I pointed out that, it's really creepy to show up and protest at the private residence of a public official. Because regardless of what other message you're trying to send, the one message that sticks is, we know where you sleep. And that should be unlawful. With respect to a judge or justice, it is unlawful. In fact, it's criminal. It's a serious felony offense in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 1507, something that I'm sure you talk about at the Schlapp home all the time. So this thing shouldn't be tolerated, and it's beyond my ability to understand why the Justice Department hasn't taken action against those organizing and participating in these protests at their homes.
Great point. I do also want to ask, you saw the Senate Democrats move quickly to try to codify Roe v. Wade. That fell flat. But when you even read the piece of legislation, I mean, it was as extreme as it gets when it comes to this issue of abortion. What do you think will be the tactics from the left as we move towards this phase, as they're going to continue to try to codify Roe v. Wade?
It appears to me that they regard abortion as sort of their comfort food of choice by political analogy. I think they're going to return to this again and again, and they're going to try to play to their radical left base, which really is wildly out of step with where the American people are as a whole. This bill did much more than just codify Roe. It did that, and as I explained in 7-9, Roe is wrong on many, many levels. But it went much further than that and made it unlawful for states to prohibit, for example, sex-selective abortions, abortions targeting babies with Down syndrome, or even targeting partial birth abortions, whereby the baby is partially delivered and then violently dismembered while being delivered, right up until the moment of live birth. This is something that, it's only something like 12 or 13% of the American people who are not horrified by that. The remaining, I wonder about why they are not horrified by it.
We have this strange thing about the evil of abortion where you had Catholic politicians, Geraldine Ferraro, Mario Cuomo, in the 1980s that said, look, I'm personally opposed to abortion, but I find it morally repugnant. I would never participate in one. Whether those words were just kind of political pablum or really heartfelt, I'll leave it to others to determine. But you've had this hard shift with Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, who don't talk about abortion as a tragedy, who don't say they would never participate in one. They fully embrace this idea that there should be no regulations on abortion. You have some states that have normalized post-birth abortions, whatever that means. Isn't it a tragedy? We can have one question about where the law should be on these moral questions. Obviously, all of us come down on the fact that life should be protected, but you have this other tragedy that this casual rhetoric as if this is just a healthcare choice. What has happened to us as a society?
Right, because this is not something. It's not like you can say that I think abortion is wrong. If you're personally against abortion, typically that's going to mean you're against abortion because you believe this is a human life that's being taken. And if it is that, then you can't treat it as if it were a morally neutral decision, like having a wart removed or the removal of some undifferentiated clump of cells. But that's not what we're talking about here. So I personally find it difficult to understand why someone would say I'm personally against it. But the law should have no reach on it. Because if you're saying I'm personally against it, you probably mean that it's because it's a human life. And it's a human life. Why would you not want the law to protect it? That is, after all, the whole purpose of law and government is to protect life, liberty, and property.
Yeah, for sure. Amen. Since I asked so many questions, do you have any final questions?
Well, I have
Senator
a lot
Lee?
of questions, and we're not done with Senator Lee just yet. But Senator, where can people get your book, Saving 9?
You can buy Saving Nine now. It's available for pre-order on Amazon, pretty much anywhere books are sold. But I know it's up on Amazon. You can order it now. If you order it now, it'll be there on or before the release date of June 7th.
And we're trying to also get, I haven't talked to Senator Lee about this, but we're going to put him on the spot. We're going to try to get him to sell it at CPAC, Texas, too, in
that'd be
Dallas.
fantastic.
I think it'll sell like hotcakes.
I agree. I think it's such an important issue. Senator, stay with us. We're going to be right back.
Welcome back to America Uncanceled. Mercy and I are talking with Senator Mike Lee. Senator Lee, I want to ask you one final question on this whole Supreme Court flap. There's interesting conversations about whether this is a leak from the left or the right. I know you don't know who the leaker is, but which theory is more plausible in your head?
Yeah, so you're right that I don't know who it was. I can therefore only speculate. I can tell you this, though. The motives, the incentives, and most importantly, the disincentives, to me, suggest that it's very unlikely to be a conservative. Look, the media establishment, the academic establishment, the entertainment industry, all of these things are there to support and back up the left. Someone on the left who leaks this, anyone who leaks this knows that they're probably going to be disbarred. And so they would need some backup plan for what they might do professionally if they're going to lose their hopefully lucrative law career. So if you were a conservative and you wanted to do this, just the disincentives alone should be enough to deter you. Whereas if you do it from the left, you may well be rewarded by a lucrative contract with MSNBC, an Ivy League law school teaching contract or something like that. So I just think it's very unlikely it came from a conservative. I could be wrong, but that's how I see it.
I have a feeling what you're saying is Sheryl Sandberg might need a new legal advisor at Facebook or whatever.
Senator, and we're talking with Senator Mike Lee, author of Saving Nine, coming out June 7th. Make sure to pre-order. It's good to be able to support our good guys that are fighting on the front line every single day. What is your final call to action when it comes to the book? When you wrap it all up, what is the message that you want to make sure that your readers are capturing and knowing what they need to say?
I want people to read Saving Nine, and once they're finished with their copy of it, they should pass it along to friends. I just want as many people
to buy an extra book, Senator. That's how you do it.
Or buy an extra book if they want to. But even more importantly than that, just make sure people read it.
Right.
Because the more people who read this, if you read this, you will win every argument about the Supreme Court ever, especially if it has anything to do with court packing. Because we make all the points that will equip you to be able to have people reach out to their senators and their congressmen and tell them, you've got to oppose this with everything in you. And so that's what they need to do. Read it, share it with friends, have them read it, and then encourage people to reach out to their federal lawmakers and tell them, don't do this.
Right. I think that's so important. I think we got to keep the pressure on, because this is something that the Democrats, they are not going to give an inch. They're going to try to keep pushing this through and make this argument. And it's going to be something to watch. I do want to address an issue that actually came up, and I cannot even believe that you were attacked by the left on this. So this was following the Uvalde tragic shooting where 19 lives were lost. It was just so incredibly sad. And you brought it up as basically saying, look, these massive shootings, this has to deal with, part of this could be because of fatherlessness and a family breakdown as being a root cause of the mass shooting, and not necessarily focusing on gun control. So you bring this up, mind you, your quote is, it raises questions like, could fatherlessness, the breakdown of families, isolation from civil society, or the glorification of violence be contributing factors? To me, it just sounds so reasonable, but yet you got attacked for this? I mean, yeah. What gives here? What's going on?
Yeah, got attacked for it because the left doesn't like anything that talks about the true source of the problem. We do have a series of social breakdowns happening. It comes about as a result of isolation especially among young men. They're steeped, they're marinated in entertainment that glorifies violence. They're inundated with hostile social media messages. And eventually these things, together with their social disconnectedness, the breakdown of institutions of faith, education, and community networks of support, these all combine in a way to bring about some really toxic outcomes. So look, this is an obvious point that I was making. But for the left, you can't talk about those things. For the left, you can't talk about anything other than, oh, well, this means we need to ban guns.
Right. You can't talk about fatherhood. You can't talk about motherhood. You can't even talk about being a woman or a man, for that matter.
That's right.
Only if you're a pregnant male. It is so utterly confusing. It's causing so much chaos. And what you start looking at all these factors with these young men who are committing these atrocious crimes, it deals with the fact that they've had dysfunctional families, they're being bullied, they've been in isolation, they have this obsession with guns. I mean, there is a pattern that we're seeing there, and these communities need to address this immediately.
Indeed. And, with all the people calling for new laws, I mean, look, if somebody can point out inadequacies in the law, we can always address those. We have to remember that every time one of these mass shootings happens, many laws, often dozens and dozens of laws, have been violated. And for every law that's been violated, there are often dozens of balls that have been dropped by people in their family, their neighborhood, their community, their school, that saw something and didn't act. There are a lot of laws that could have prevented some of these shootings, laws that allow for people who have been committed to an institution based on a mental condition, people who have been charged and convicted of a crime of domestic violence, for example, can't buy guns. So some of these laws can reach many of these people. But when those laws aren't acted upon, no amount of law is going to change that. And just by adding additional laws, criminalizing more behavior, that's not necessarily going to fix it either.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I think you point up, I always say it this way. In the last 100 years, what do we have? A lot more guns or a lot less families intact?
Right.
It's obvious what
Right.
the biggest impact has been. Societal change has been the intentional destruction and delegitimizing of the family. Black Lives Matter said that the concept of family was an old-fashioned Western idea of patriarchy that should be ripped out of society. So you have Hollywood glorifying this idea that families are an old-fashioned idea. And this constant attack on the family has young men also saying, maybe I shouldn't have to listen to authority. Maybe I do things my own way. And it is a tragic thing. And more people are going to die in these terrible situations until we get back to the idea that the family is the most important function level of government and to have a civilization.
That's exactly right. And there are some things I think we could do that might work. A lot of these people, a lot of these young shooters have been active on social media. And in many, many cases, it seems like lately more cases than not, the shooters prior to the shooting have engaged in a long practice of things, including social media posts that will glorify violence, in some cases glorify killers, in some cases express ambitions for engaging in a mass killing event of one sort or another, in some cases even posting elaborate plans on what they intend to do. Now, look, social media companies seem to be able to predict what kind of toothbrush I'm going to buy next and when I'm going to buy it, long before I've ever even thought about it. If they can do that, certainly they're in a position to be able to detect when somebody has posted something that could be a warning sign. They ought to be reporting those to the authorities, and my hope is that they will start doing that. If they won't do it voluntarily, we'll make them.
And the other part of this whole crazy part of social media is them feeding you because they see what you want to look at. And if they're feeding these young men more violent images because they've sought those violent images on the internet, that's all part of the kind of destructive nature of what's going on in these screens that young people are looking at like all day long.
Right.
It is indeed. And when people are marinated in that type of violent entertainment for years, coupled with, in many instances, pornographic images, both of which tend to degrade the dignity of human life, and tend to desensitize and dehumanize, objectify individual human beings. After a while, this starts to wear down what would otherwise be their more human instincts. And so that's why I think there is a lot of role for entertainment media and social media to play here. But you notice when these things happen, you don't hear people saying, that's it, we need to abandon the First Amendment by telling them, by government imposing restrictions on what they ought to publish. But they're very quick to want to undermine the Second Amendment or even repeal.
Yeah, and I mean, big tech has failed us in so many ways. I know you have this bipartisan bill, the Digital Advertising Act, to restore and protect competition in digital advertising. Let me get your quick response on this. Why did you decide to move forward with this piece of legislation? And why is it so important to just break this monopoly that we're seeing on the American economy?
Look, in the ad tech space, Google is, to describe it as a monopoly is a dramatic understatement. Google is operating as the buyer, the seller, the dealer, the broker, the publisher, the operator of the exchange platform. It's wearing all these hats at once and dominating the marketplace. And so if they're going to be that big and do all those things, they need to split up their business into multiple enterprises. Fair competition demands it. And this is consistent with the other objectives of our competition, antitrust laws, to make sure the American people have access to competition. This one, Mercedes, is bipartisan. I mean, Ted Cruz is joining me as a co-sponsor, but so is Amy Klobuchar and Richard Blumenthal. So this thing's got some real legs.
So do you think it has a chance of passing in the Senate?
I do. I think it has a great chance of passing in the Senate, and I think it should pass.
Wow.
We'd be better off as a result of it.
Senator Lee, I'm a fan of making the CEOs of big tech sweat. So I might not be as scrupulous as you are as exactly what the perfect policy prescription is. I love the fact that these are all live wires. That alone will cause them to change their act. But the one thing of dividing them into smaller entities, if we can't stop the very behavior that's causing so many problems in society, whether that's in one big company or three smaller companies, how do we make sure they actually stop the bad activities? Like conservatives, for instance.
Right. Okay, so excellent question, Matt. I'm glad you asked it. I've got two responses to it. First, this will help with that because part of what allows them to alienate roughly half of their American clientele, their customer base, is the fact that they're the only show in town. They have complete market hegemony here and market dominance, and they know that people can't just go somewhere else. And so that's why they do it. So this would help with that because it would make them less automatically dominant. Secondly, I've also got other legislation that would help more directly with that called the Promise Act. The Promise Act says that if you've got one set of statements, it's very common in the online interactive platform space, search engines, social media companies. If through your corporate statements and the statements of your CEOs, you claim to be politically even-handed and neutral, and you in fact do another thing, we would classify that as a deceptive business practice actionable under Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act. So those two bills would do a lot. The first by itself, I think, would fix a lot of the problem. Both of them would completely fix it.
Okay, can I ask one more question?
Oh my goodness, yes.
What are the chances that Republicans after November have gavels in the United States Senate? Above 50% or less than 50%?
I'm putting it at above 50%. The reason is people are tired of the Biden economy. People in Utah are tired of paying every month just for their basic household expenses an additional $751 every month, more than they were paying just at the beginning of last year. This is the predictable, foreseeable, and in fact foreseen, and I'd argue intended, result of Biden's horrible policies. Overspending, overregulation, his desire to shut down the American energy industry. They've all combined in a really nasty way. The people are tired of it. They want something different. That's why they're going to hire us to do the job.
Right. Well, it's an exciting time. It's a tough time, too, for so many Americans, but we got to stay focused on making sure we can win back the Senate, win back the House, and then eventually win back the White House. Senator Mike Lee, thanks for standing up for fathers. Thanks for fighting against horrible big tech. And remember to buy Senator Mike Lee's book, Saving Nine, which I love. I might need to write a book called Saving Our Nine Lives because it's been quite a year, but we want to thank you so much for all you do and all that your family does to keep America safe, secure, and strong.
Thank you very much. And remember, you'll never lose another political argument after you read Saving Nine.
I can't wait. Maybe I can debate Matt Schlapp on this.
I hope she doesn't read it. Thank you, Mike Lee. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
And we want to thank you all for watching America Uncanceled. Remember to follow us on social media at mschlapp, at Mercedes Schlapp, at CPAC. Also, register. CPAC Texas is coming August 4th through the 7th. We're going to have dynamic speakers, and it's going to be a great time for all of us to get together during the summertime and get ready for those midterm elections. So go to conservative.org to get your tickets.
Bye.